Well, hello. Welcome to this first in a series of charcoal demonstrations here in my studio. Today's demonstration will be a quick sketch of the head, and we'll cover most of the basic fundamentals of charcoal drawing as well as a few advanced techniques that I've been experimenting with. So I've saved the in-depth discussion of my materials for the special features portion of this video, so be sure and check that out before or after I do this demonstration. And having said all that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I now have everything set up and I'm ready to get started, but before I do, I just want to say a few quick words about my setup. The paper here I'm using is a Strathmore 400. It's a 3-ply paper and it's extra smooth, and the reason I'm using extra smooth is so that I can get more subtle detail that as opposed to using the more textured paper. But I do use textured paper as well. I just, for this one particular demonstration, want to use the extra smooth. And I just have it taped up here to a piece of 5/8 inch particle board. This is just 24 inch by 24 inch particle board that I picked up at Home Depot. And the tape that I'm using is a gaffer's tape. This is basically just white duct tape. And you can pick this up at your local hardware store. You can really use any type of tape as long as it has a good grip on the paper. But recently I've been using these little black clips to clip the paper on to the particle board. And the advantage of the clips over the tape is that the tape will sometimes tear the paper when you're taking it off. So I've been using the clips, but for this demonstration I already have the tape on, so I'm going to go ahead and use the tape. And the reason I'm using a 3-ply paper as opposed to 1 or 2 is because I need the thickness when I'm spraying the acetone on, so that it doesn't warp the paper. And I just feel that the 3-ply is more sturdy, and I like a sturdy paper. So next I'm going to introduce my model. This is Stephanie. I have her placed over here to my right. And one thing I like to do when setting up my model is try to do it in the most natural way possible. I don't want my models to look posed. I want them to look as though I've captured some moment in time. And if I set them up that way, it will show and come through in my work. And secondly, the lighting. The lighting that I have on Stephanie here, I'm using 6 4-foot fluorescent bulbs. The temperature of these bulbs are 5,000 Kelvin, although it doesn't really matter about the temperature when you're working in a monochromatic medium such as we're doing today. But I just have 6 fluorescent 4-foot bulbs. And the reason I'm using fluorescent as opposed to incandescent, I've used incandescent before, but the reason I'm using fluorescent in this particular demonstration is because of the nice diffused light. I get a very soft turn of form, and the shadow lines under the nose and in the eyes and things like that, under the chin, I just get a softer turn, a softer light, where the light turns to shadow. And so that's what I'm using as far as lighting goes. As you can see here in Stephanie, the light is very soft, and if I did have a north light window in this studio, I don't, but if I did, I would probably be working under that lighting as opposed to the fluorescent bulbs, just because I like north light better than any type of artificial lighting. But I don't have that yet, so until then I'm working with fluorescence. And the last thing that I want to talk about before we begin today is I want to talk about where I'm headed. I want to talk about my ultimate goal before I begin, because I think it's very important to have a goal. I think a lot of people jump right into drawing. They'll set everything up and rush right into it just to get started and not have any idea where they're headed, what the finished piece is going to look like. And if you don't know where you're headed, how are you going to know if you get there or not? So the way I see it, there are basically 2 goals in this. I could go one of 2 ways. My first goal could be to basically do an exact rendering of what's in front of me. Copy stroke for stroke every tiny tight detail there is in front. And I do believe that if you're a beginner, I believe it's very important to go through this first stage, because if you can't copy what's in front of you, how are you going to be able to simplify and alter it and make things look better and sort of move things around? So I believe the first way we can go with this is to copy, make an exact rendering, photographic rendering. And that's the first stage you should go through. But today, and this is the second way we can go, you could bring this beyond the traditional art class method and turn this into a piece of finished art. And that's what we're going to do today. And so you might ask, well, how do we do that? How do we transform that and go beyond into a finished piece of art? Well, the way I like to do it is to start off with an idea, a certain mood that I want to convey to the viewer. And so once I have that mood, then I narrow it down and say, well, what subject matter will best convey that mood? I could say, well, a landscape might. No, a landscape will not. Still life will not. I can narrow it down to maybe a figure. But in this case, the specific mood that I want to convey to the viewer is best represented in a head study. So then I thought about 3 or 4 different poses that might best show that mood, and I narrowed it down to basically one in my head. So I set the model up, and it resonated exactly what I wanted to show it. It just showed basically what my mood was better than anything else. So once I had the model set up and I had a clear image in my mind of what this was going to look like, to best show and communicate my idea, then all I had to know was step by step of how I was going to get there. It's like when you're building a house and you have your floor plan, you need to know, well, how am I actually going to build this house? I need to first lay my foundation, build the walls, and then the roof. And in this case, I need to know exactly what strokes I'm putting down first, my mid strokes, and my final touches. And honestly, some of this is experimental. I'll get to certain stages and I will try something and it might look better than my original mental concept. So there are sometimes sidetracks, but for the most part, I want a clear idea of how I'm going to get there. And there are a few deviations now and then, but I think it's important to have a somewhat of a step-by-step way. But I do believe that all comes from experience, because I think if you don't know your tools, you're not going to know what you can do. So first off, you need to know your tools. Do a lot of sketches. I've done many hundreds of sketches, so I know my tools very well. And once you know your tools and what they can do, then you can take all the knowledge and put it together and say, well, I know that I need these strokes at the beginning, then these, and then the final touches. And so that's what's going on in my mind before I begin. I have my goal and I have my plan of action, how I'm going to get there. And so now that you know that, we're going to see if I can do what I'm talking about, and we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Okay, I'm starting off here with a charcoal sock, and the charcoal sock is not something you can buy at the art store. I made this one myself out of 2 old socks and a few charcoal bricks, but if you are interested in making one, I show exactly how to make one in the special features portion of this video. I like to use the charcoal sock in these preliminary stages, especially just because of its erasing qualities. And I think that's very important in a charcoal, because one of the restrictions of charcoal as opposed to oil painting is the lack of the ability to fix major problems. When I put a really dark down on paper, I just have to bear in mind that I may not be able to erase it later on. So that's why I use the charcoal sock, because I can put it down very lightly and I don't have to worry about erasing it at this stage. And another reason I like to use the charcoal sock, I think it's such a great tool just because of its edge qualities. I like the fact that it puts down very soft edges so that I could add hard edges later. And my thoughts at this stage are basically to darken the head as a whole, so I can move into darker shapes with a pencil and erase with my kneaded eraser for the lights. Here I'm working with the blending stump, and this can be bought at the art store. I think all this is rolled up paper sharpened down to a point, and it's nice for smudging these areas, but here I'm actually using it as a drawing tool, because yet again at this early stage in my work, I'm trying to keep everything eraser friendly and soft. Now back with the charcoal sock, I'm darkening up these eyes And now for the kneaded eraser. I'm using this eraser as a drawing tool now. I've changed its shape to a fine point with my fingers, and I'm just pulling away these lights now. Notice how soft this is. I have no borders, no hard lines around anything yet at this stage. Here I'm using the blender here yet again to show where the edge of the cheek comes in. I'm just pulling this off. This is my focal point that I'm working on. The reason I'm starting with my focal point is because that's what I can see most clearly in my mind. And so once I get that correct and exactly right, then I can work out and I'll have something to judge the rest of my work against. Here for the kneaded eraser. That was a good stroke there to define where the background meets the hair. I'm still working with the eraser here. And here's the blender. Still trying to pull off this edge here on the cheek. Notice that this blender here has charcoal on the two tips, and that's because I sort of hit the tips of them with my charcoal sock to put a little bit of charcoal there so I can use it as a drawing tool. Here I'm just working out the eye. And again, I'm using the blender at this stage because I don't want this to get too dark. I want to keep it under control. I know that I could erase any of these lines if I need to, but I do need to get this a little darker. Now I'm working out where the hair comes in. That's good. Here I'm just using the sock and some sandpaper to shield an area that I do not want to get darker. It's a good way to create a little bit of an edge and have a little bit more variety as well. And here for the eraser again. Always looking for different and new ways to push charcoal to make it look good and keep variety in my work. Okay, I'm just working my way down the face now. I pretty much know exactly where these eyes are going to go. You notice I still have not darkened them yet. I still have control, and I'm just moving my way down the face now, working on the nose, pushing these darks within the dark values, and probably my biggest thought at this point is keeping the light family separate from the dark family. That's how I can turn form. Here you see I'm doing just as much drawing pretty much with the eraser as I am with the blending stump or anything else. And I like to draw with the eraser as much as I can just because you know, you don't have to erase it if you're using the eraser. I can always cover it back up if it's in the wrong spot. And just a few more marks here with the blender. I'm working on this edge here. I'm just sharpening it up just a little bit. Coming down here. Now for the charcoal pencil. This is an 6B extra soft. And now I'm going to go for these next few values. Pushing these values, I'm going to be moving into values 4, 5, and 6. I know this is going to be dark, and now that I know where to put it, I'm not going to hesitate and I'm going to just stick it right in there. I still need to be careful though, because this is much more difficult to erase using this pencil than anything else. But I'm pretty confident that I know where this is going to go, so I'm not too worried about it. And as you can see, I've already laid down my foundational strokes. All of that preliminary work with the blender and the sock, that was my foundation. And now I know where everything goes, so now I'm building the walls, pushing these values in my focal point. And also you can see too that I haven't really bounced around this entire work. I haven't touched the background. I really haven't touched the hair because that's not my focal point. My focal point is her eyes. And I know that if I get her eyes as correct as I can, then everything else is really going to fall into place because I can judge all the rest of my work on something that I know is correct and very powerful. So here I'm just using the pencil again, And I'm getting ready to use the charcoal brick here in just 1 second. Just darkening this value up. Now here for the charcoal brick, I'm using an extra soft charcoal brick, and I broke the brick in half. There we go, that's nice. I love using the brick whenever I can get away with it because of its the shapes it can make. It simplifies so well, and that's what I'm after. I'm after taking something that's very complex like her hair and doing it in as few strokes as possible. Now back with the blender, I just need to soften a few of these edges. I don't want too many hard edges in my work because to me hard edges are like little focal points. They're like little attracting areas, and I want the viewer to look in only a few specific spots in this work, and I want everything else to sort of blend into each other. So the way I can tell where to put a hard edge and where not to is, first of all, by squinting down at my subject. When you squint down, it sort of simplifies and makes it easier to see where the hard edges go and where the soft edges go. And you do that by squinting down and looking at the edge relationships. Because when you squint down, the hard edges still remain hard. The soft edges get a little softer, and you can see where there are lost edges, where there is no edge at all. So squinting down is a very helpful way, something that I do a lot. Now back for the charcoal brick here. I'm using the brick here, but I'm lightly touching it to the paper to create this texture effect. And now back with a pencil. I need to darken up these values in the eyes here. And the reason is because I need to still separate the value families. I'm working toward maybe 2 values in the dark and 3 or 4 values in the light. And when I separate these values like this, it's really just showing and giving more of a 3-dimensional quality to this work. It's turning the form. I've noticed sometimes in beginners, they will not get the dark family dark enough. And when you do this, you're basically just taking the realism out of it. So watch out for that. Make sure you really study your subject and know how much darker the darks are than the lights. I'm still working with this extra soft charcoal pencil, and I'm still darkening up these dark values. Here I need an edge, and just sort of bouncing around the face here, darkening up things as I notice them. One of the things that I think is extremely important is not to move on to something else until everything that I have is correct. I don't want to say, well, this is very close, so I'm going to go ahead and do something else and maybe come back to it. I'm trying to, whenever I catch something that's not right, I'm going to make sure and fix it if I do know how, if I possibly can. Sometimes that's not so easy though. Sometimes you need more work around completed before you can tell if something's correct or not. And at this stage, the eyes are almost completely finished. I'm not going to do too much more work to the eyes because I do not want to overwork them, first of all, and they really don't need too much more. So now I'm sort of bouncing around just a bit, adding a little bit of variety here and there in the hair, and I'm going to move up now to the top, and I'm using the charcoal brick here, just lightly touching it and dragging it against the paper here to create a little bit of texture. I like a good variety of texture too in my work. And placing these darks here, this is where her forehead meets the hair, but I'm going to keep it soft though. This is all part of my mental image in my mind. I'm basically looking at my model, and like we were talking about before, I'm using my model to help me out and to alter it to the original mood that I have, that mood that I'm trying to communicate to you. And I'm leaving things out, I'm altering things to only show you the things that I want you to see. I don't want to make this an exact rendering of what's in front of me, otherwise it would just be a photographic copy, and that's not what I'm after. I'm not after a photographic copy. If I wanted to do that, I could just take a photograph and print it out, but I'm after a work of art, and a work of art shows what I want to communicate to you. So it's my power to choose what to leave and what to show, what to emphasize. And so that's what I'm doing now. And I'm using the extra soft pencil again, working my way down. Now for the mouth. And let's see if I can do this here with a blender. That's a good stroke. There we go. Now back with the eraser. I'm just alternating between my pencil, my blender, and the eraser. I need these values under the nose to be a little bit darker. The frame of mind that I have when I'm working, as far as edges are concerned, is I like to work from soft edges to hard edges. I like to leave the hard edges until the end, because to me it's much easier to, like I said earlier, add an extra hard edge than it is to already have an edge and erase it. So I'm trying to work soft to hard, and there's a wide variety of edges ranging everywhere from a lost edge to a hard edge, and those are my thoughts on that. Back with the charcoal pencil here I'm still using the extra soft pencil. That still allows me to retain some sort of eraser if I need to. Here I'm softening this edge here. I feel that there's really no need to put a hard edge on the cheek right there, but this right here does need a hard edge. Down here on the bottom, I'm going to need to pick that up there. Okay, that's good. You might ask how I know whether or not I want a hard edge or not, and a lot of it is judgment call on my part, but I'm always looking for a good variety, especially with the edges. When I go down the form, I want to say to myself, well, where can I put a hard edge and where do I need to keep it soft? I don't want too many hard edges, but then I don't want too many soft edges. So it's really a balance and a judgment call on my part. Let me just add too that although all of this stuff that I'm telling you may seem like rules, it's merely just a few suggestions that I'm throwing at you, so don't take them to be rules in any way. Just a few suggestions that I found that help me out when I'm working, and they're just things that I'm thinking about. So now I'm going to spread out just a little bit more and start working on the background and Stephanie's shirt, things like that. And I'm back here with a blender, and I'm just suggesting these little areas and pushing this charcoal around just a bit. By the way, the blender also works really nice in combination with the charcoal brick, just because I can push it and create different textures by just rubbing the blender over the texture of the charcoal brick. As you can see here, I'm also using the blender to show where the back of her head comes in, and doing it very lightly so that if I need to, I can erase. But I'm hoping that I will not have to erase, because another one of my little goals is when I'm moving around to put as few strokes as possible so it doesn't look overworked. I don't like things to look overworked. I like to do them as direct as possible, and I think one of the only ways to do that successfully is to visualize each individual stroke before you put it down. Try to think to yourself, is this going to help or hurt the piece, and is what I'm about to do going to add, or is it just going to be one stroke too many? That's what I like to think in my mind. And now I'm moving from the charcoal brick to the charcoal sock. I need to darken this area here, and now for the needed eraser, I'm going to shape this now and pull this off. That's good. Another reason I like to keep this fresh as possible, for two reasons really. One is I think it looks stronger, and two is that it tells the viewer that I meant to do this, that I did a certain stroke on purpose. That's always nice. Here I'm working with the charcoal brick. And now for the sock. I'm darkening the hair as a whole using the soft, keeping all of these edges very soft. Now I have the kneaded eraser here. Just separating the values between the hair and her shirt. And in case you're wondering, I'm using a cane hooked over the top of my particle board as a hand rest. And here, while I'm using the extra soft pencil, you can see how otherwise I would be placing my hand on the paper itself and damaging some of the surface that I've been working with. So the cane works well, as I found, as opposed to anything else like a mall stick or whatever. Now I'm back with the charcoal brick and just suggesting a few marks. I'm working on the foundation of my background here. And now I'm going to lay this down for the first layer of charcoal shavings. Okay. I'm covering this up with a paper towel so that I don't ruin some of the work in the face. And I'm just using a big chunk of vine charcoal and sandpaper here. Fine sandpaper. And you can see I'm sanding this down here, all around the hair and the background. You can see how this works. And now I'm using acetone. This is just extra strength acetone. I picked this up at the hardware store. And I will caution you that when using this acetone, it's very toxic and it's extremely flammable. So you want to keep a well-ventilated room, and you want to don't want to be lighting up any cigarettes or any type of flames or anything around. So you can see how the acetone formed a bond between the paper and the charcoal, and when I touch it, it's a very light bond. So now I'm going to work into these charcoal shavings with a charcoal brick. Pull down the surface. That's nice. You can see the soft shape that I just made with a brick to form a shape in the hair. Now I'm bringing this down the back. I like to look for as many different ways to put the charcoal on as I can, and using these charcoals is just one other way. The charcoal shavings, using the charcoal shavings, just one other way to add variety. And I'm still using the brick here, putting some of these darker shapes in. I like to have as wide a variety as possible in my work. And all the time I keep coming up with new ways to put charcoal on. It's such a delight to use them in my work. Let me say too that this method of applying the charcoal that I'm doing now it's only one way that I work. I have many different ways of putting charcoal on. Here with the acetone again, I'm just getting a few drip effects, and now I'm using a brush to push this charcoal around. I have many ways of putting the charcoal on, many different methods, but this is just one way, and I thought I would show you this time. We'll cover maybe a few different ways in some videos to come of different ways to put the charcoal on, but I'm using the charcoal brick and pushing it over these shavings. And now for the kneaded eraser, I'm going to pull off a few of these highlights here. I know these are going to remain light in the end, so I'm going to go and pull them away before they get too covered up. And as far as my background design and where I'm going with that, that's basically just part of my original mental concept and my ending goal too. Before I even started this, I thought in my mind what best would look good behind her, the shapes coming off of her hair. And you know, it really starts off in my head as, first of all, I have the head in my mind and how I'm going to pose the head, and then I think to myself, well, what shapes can go around the head to best show a good variety and still a good balance of light dark patterns. So it's really coming down to a judgment call on my part as far as that goes, but planning ahead really helps out because I don't want to do too much experiment in the background as well. I want to know pretty much what I'm going to do. Now, some deviations will occur, but for the most part, I have visualized in my head beforehand where I'm going with this. So, using the charcoal brick now, need a few dark shapes over here. You might have noticed a little earlier when I was using the brush, whenever I know I'm going to have to use the eraser over the charcoal shavings, I just wipe away some of the excess shavings with the brush so that I don't smear the charcoal shavings into the paper. Now I'm still working with the brick again, just cleaning up some of these shapes. And of course I'm getting these shapes from two sources. One source is from the subject itself, and the other source is from my original mental picture. Sort of a combination of the two and what I want to show you. And it's a translation or a simplification in a way too of the subject matter. See here I'm wiping away some of the shavings here because I'm going to need the eraser here in just a bit. This is just a dry, regular, soft-haired brush. I picked this up at my local art store. Now for the kneaded eraser, I need to shape this for a clean mark. There, that's good. Here we go, and here's for some more of this sock. And a little bit of acetone, not too much, just to create a little bit of interest here in the background. I'm using this acetone as opposed to any other liquid because it evaporates almost instantly, and it's the only liquid that I know of that does not form a residue on the surface. Alcohol does not work, water does not work, unless you're working on a gesso panel. I'm working on paper, so I have to use the acetone, although it is toxic, but it's the only thing that works. It works the best, actually. So you don't really want to use water. That's going to leave a residue, and you don't want to use any type of alcohol either. And as long as you keep a well-ventilated room and follow the basic safety precautions, then no harm will come. Here I'm using, again, the brick, charcoal brick, and this is still the soft charcoal brick. I've been using the soft pencil and the soft brick at this stage, and I'm pushing the hair back and forth, just trying to create these different effects that I'm seeing in my mind. Now I have the extra soft pencil again, and for the brick, just really alternating between these tools. Every now and then a stroke will happen that I guess I would call an accidental stroke, and sometimes they're for the best and sometimes they're not, but when they are for the best and I can remember how I managed to do it, I usually remember that, keep that in my memory, so that the next time I do a charcoal, I remember that I could do that certain effect. It's just one more good tool to add. That was a good eraser mark. I'm using the kneaded eraser now. My basic attitude and thoughts toward the charcoal at this point now are also still to darken up everything as a whole. My design is pretty much in place. I have my focal point in, and now I just need to sort of move around, darkening things here and there, and I'm starting to tidy up the piece now and unify it as a whole. And now we're going to have a little bit more fun with the acetone. I'm going to cover up the face so I don't get any drips on her forehead. And I'm going to spray this area up here with the shavings. You see these splatter marks? Those are a lot of fun. And now I'm using a brush dipped in acetone. This is just one more way to add variety to the piece. This is just a regular soft-haired brush again, and I've dipped it in a little cup of acetone, and I'm pushing the charcoal around. This gives it more of a painterly look. I really like this. But you can overdo it though. I have to watch out. Some of these effects look nice, but when they're overworked, they look really bad. So it's always a balance I'm thinking of. And Stephanie, you are doing a wonderful job. Some of this work I'm doing may look like I'm just throwing strokes around, but these are planned strokes. Now I have a larger brush dipped in acetone to create a few effects up here in the background. I need a bit more variety. That's good. A few more out here. That's good. Now I'm painting with the charcoal. And a few more drippings here. thinking about variety at this point. What things can I do to add a larger variety in this work? Now I'm running the charcoal brick over the shavings again. I'm going to pull away some edges here. Now for the suck, let's darken up this value. And the kneaded eraser. That's good. This is looking very good. Very happy with this. Just a few more minutes here and I'm going to be finished. Let's create a few effects up here in the top. That's good. I'm running the kneaded eraser over the charcoal shavings. Stephanie, this looks just like you. This is very good. Doing a great job. Now I have the charcoal sock again, and I'm setting the groundwork for one more charcoal shaving I think I'm going to do before I'm finished, and I just need this overall background to be a little bit darker. So I'm using the sock. Great tool to do this. Darkening all this up. I need this to show through some of the shavings. All right, now I'm using the charcoal brick and sandpaper. And the reason I'm using the brick instead of the vine charcoal is because the brick is a little bit denser and will be a little bit tougher. The vine charcoal comes off a lot easier, and I want this to stay on. This is going to be my final charcoal shaving. There we go, fix this here. I have the face covered up again with a paper towel. And now for the acetone, I'm going to give it a light dusting. I'm just keeping it off the paper just a bit. This does take a little bit of practice to get this just right. And if you're not careful like I'm doing, knock off too much of the charcoal shavings, but it's working out so far. That's good. Don't want to do too much. Fix this here. Okay. All right. Very nice. I'm very happy with this. See how the charcoal shavings unified the piece as a whole. Now just a few more marks here and I'm finished. I need an eraser here. And now for the brick, darken this hair value just a little bit. I want the darkest darks to be here in the eyes and in the hair, just because that's my focal point. I'm just using the brick, the soft brick. It's very important at this stage to not lose sight of my goal. It's extremely easy to ruin a piece now. I've ruined a lot of pieces now because I got tired and stopped concentrating. I have to keep sight of my goal and don't overwork the piece. That's what I'm thinking. Don't overwork. Only put what is absolutely necessary. Having to visualize each stroke, because it's so easy to start fooling around and get carried away with all of these crazy effects. I have to keep all of my effects subtle, but I still need the variety. That's good. I'm using the brick now. And now back with the pencil. And there's the finger. Good tool sometimes too. And now I have my brush dipped in acetone to add a few more of these painterly strokes here. Notice how her head blends in with the background. It's one unified piece. It's not separate. I didn't put a head down and then the background behind her. I want this to look like it's tied together. I think that's really important in my work especially. And just a few more strokes here to tie this all together with the brush and acetone. Coming very close to the end. I've basically said everything I wanted to say in this piece. I think it communicates very well my original mood and idea, so not much more could help it. So I've got to be really careful now, and I think I need one more light coming off of here. This has just been bothering me, so a lot of times I look, there we go, a lot of times I just go around looking for things that bother me and fix them. And this bothers me now. That's good. One more dark underneath the chin here, and I think that'll do it. Well, Stephanie, I do believe this is finished. I'm very happy with this, and I'm happy you were able to join me as well. I hope to see you again next time, and until then, I wish you all the best in your work.